Could the New York Mets swoop in and sign Jordan Montgomery to bolster their rotation? I'll discuss that as well as 5 X factors for the Mets this season on today's episode of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Jordan Montgomery is still a free agent, and according to Joel Sherman today, the Mets and the Yankees have yet to shut the door on signing Montgomery. Very interesting. Now, his market is not clear right now. What does he want? Who else is in? We've heard some, reports out there that he has 2 long-term offers on the table. What do those long-term offers look like, and who are they coming from? The Los Angeles Angels have a 5-year, $80 million deal on the table. How attractive is that really? It's not an extremely high offer. Otherwise, maybe he would have taken it. And again, this is just me guessing. I'm not saying that's actually the offer on the table. And maybe he's also looking at the Angels and saying, why would I want to go pitch on that team? And we don't know where that other long-term contract is potentially coming from, but it is interesting to try to look at the market and say, who is going to sign Jordan Montgomery? Because so many teams need pitching. The Baltimore Orioles could use another starter right now, and they're going to have new ownership coming in. Could they make a big splash right away? The Yankees, long been linked to all the starting pitchers in this market. They had Jordan Montgomery at one point in time. They traded him for Harrison Bader, now a Met. Would he want to go back to New York? And then there's the Boston Red Sox, who have always been the team that's been linked to Montgomery this offseason because Montgomery's fiance or his wife has a residency, I believe, in Boston, something along those lines. He was in Boston this offseason, I believe. And so there was always that thought that it was a natural fit. But once Lucas Giolito went down, are the Red Sox really ready to spend on this team? Especially if it is a short-term deal that he ultimately gets. Does Jordan Montgomery want the long-term contract right now? Does he want the short-term opt-out deal that Blake Snell signed, Matt Chapman signed, Cody Bellinger signed? Or does he want some combination of the two? Here's where I get into my Mets conspiracy. Here's a little quote from a press conference where the New York Mets introduced a Scott Boras client, JD Martinez. He said this. Quote, I think with Stearns, I think with some additions you might add, this is going to be a tough team. Did he mean the trade deadline? What other additions are there? Is that just player speak? You're in an introductory press conference. That's just what you say. He's been around the block for a long time. Or does he have some inside information? Familiar with Scott Boras' clients, familiar with negotiation process that just went on where maybe they told him some things? Could the Mets be this team that's just waiting in the wings for after that first day of the season where they could sign Jordan Montgomery to a creative contract structure where everyone gets what they want? Similar to the contract they just signed JD Martinez to. Martinez, his best offer was $14 million from the Giants. He wanted to get close to that dollar amount, but play on a team that he deemed a contender and in a ballpark where he thought he could thrive. So he gets to sign with the Mets. He gets $12 million, but to help the Mets out, it's deferred heavily. $7.5 million deferred well beyond into the 2030s. And right now, the Mets only had to pay him $4.5 million, $2.5 million in a signing bonus. So he gets a little bit of a carrot up front. But then during the season, he's not making much of anything. The luxury tax for JD Martinez, it came down because of the deferred money. So instead of paying him $12 million against the tax, it was about $9 million against the tax. And that saved the Mets a ton when you look at the penalty. plus the fact that this year's capital going out to him wasn't that much, $4.5 million. So could there be some creative structure deal that has been talked about where Montgomery ends up on the New York Mets? Here's another little thing that I want to throw out there, right? Scott Boras clients this offseason have been signing to a couple places. Yes, of course, there's Rhys Hoskins who signed with the Brewers, and Bellinger going back to the Cubs. With that said, the Giants have been a Boras hotspot. Jung-Hoo Lee signs there earlier in the offseason. All of a sudden, the market's breaking down on some players, and who ends up over there? Matt Chapman, Blake Snell, just all heading over to San Francisco, play together. He also has Michael Conforto in San Francisco, though I don't think that one's connected. You look at the Mets right now. They have Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Sean Manaea, sneaky Boras client. You wouldn't know that one. JD Martinez now. Could Jordan Montgomery be another player that he moves to one spot where he's got a lot of clients? And the thought is, hey, my clients are going to play great together. The team's going to do really well. Then everyone's going to hit free agency and get paid. Sean Manaea has an opt-out. Pete Alonso is going to be a free agent. JD Martinez is on a one-year deal. And Jordan Montgomery could conceivably have an opt-out. This can be a rising tides, lift all ships situation where, hey, everyone goes to the Mets in a ballpark that's fun to play in with a lot of fanfare and a big market that is still attracted to some players, and go out, have a big season, and a lot of those guys could test free agency again and potentially do a lot better the next time around. Hypothetically, if we're looking at a contract, that would make sense. Let's actually first look at the Blake Snell deal, right? Snell signs with the Giants on a 2-year, $62 million deal. On the surface, you say, wow, $31 million a year, not bad. Then you look at the language of that contract. $17 million signing bonus. Okay, so he got that up front, right? No. Right in the fine print, payable on January 15th, 2026, when he's off the roster. He's going to earn $15 million this season. The San Francisco Giants, while their luxury tax hit is more than that, it's, I think it's $29.7 million about, because there's deferred money on the second year of the deal. But basically, they are paying him $15 million this season. He can opt out, and then they'll just have to pay him that $17 million signing bonus a couple years later, which is weird to me. How is that even considered a signing bonus? But hey, that's how it was structured. Now, he'll earn $30 million in 2025, but $15 million of that is deferred. So if Blake Snell stays on the Giants for this 2-year deal, over this span of the contract, he'll be getting paid $30 million in those first 2 years. Then he'll get the $17 million as soon as he becomes a free agent, or a little bit after that, I guess, in January of 2026. And then later on, July of 2027, he'll get the other $15 million. So it is interesting how they can structure that contract. We already talked about they structured JD Martinez's contract. Here's just something I threw out there on Jordan Montgomery. Let's say it's a 5-year, $75 million deal. Year one, he gets $20 million. I don't know how much they would defer. Maybe they defer 10 of it just to help with that luxury tax. Year two, $20 million. Maybe this one's $5 million deferred. Okay, so it's helping the Mets in the short term where their payroll is really bloated to be able to pay him on the front end. And then year three is $15 million. Year four and year five, $10 million apiece. Now, why would he take a deal that's going to get him $10 million apiece at the back end? Because he gets the opt-outs, the Boras special. He can hit free agency after 2024, 2025, and 2026. By stretching it out that way and structuring it that way, it becomes a 5-year, $75 million deal for tax purposes with deferrals that would drop down the present day value even further. The reason why I say all of that is, let's just say it is that with the $15 million that would be deferred across the first 2 years, he's going to come in when it comes to luxury tax at less than $15 million, which would be a lot easier for Steve Cohen to stomach on that luxury tax, penalty he'll have to face. So I could see, if the Mets sign Jordan Montgomery, whether it's that structure or something else, some creative way to get around the tax a little bit, to maybe not feel it as much this year, but eventually get Jordan Montgomery his money to pitch for the Mets in 2024 and to allow him to hit that market again if he has another great season. We'll see. How would he fit into this rotation? He's better than right now on opening day any starter you got. As much as I am buying into Luis Severino and Sean Manaea, and we'll talk about them coming up here and X factors for this season, Jordan Montgomery coming off the season that he had and how dependable he has been over the last 3 years, he would immediately be the ace until Kodai Senga comes back and the number 2 once he does. And that's really valuable to the Mets. And if it pushes Adrian Hauser or Tyler McGill into the bullpen, or if it pushes McGill to Syracuse, whatever it is, it would be worth it. And it would make the Mets significantly better. And I think they like what they just did on JD Martinez. I think Steve Cohen in particular loves being able to text his players, hey, I got you, JD Martinez. I'm sure he'd love to send another text in that group text with Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Lindor, and Pete Alonso. We got Montgomery. And maybe the Mets look like a lot more of a threat come the first week of the season. Let's just say it might take Montgomery some time to get ready like it did JD Martinez. Maybe that series against the Braves a couple weeks in, maybe that's when they actually look like a team that could be a real threat in the National League. Anyway, we're going to get to top 5 X factors for the upcoming season next. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Testing your skills on PrizePicks this season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you could turn $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps because it's daily fantasy sports made easy, where you pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Right now, you can look at MLB season stats by finding the MLB season tab. That's MLB SZN. And there you will find all the projections for some of the Mets stars, like Brandon Nimmo on home runs, 20.5, had 24 last year, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's going to hit the over again. Edwin Diaz, 31.5 on saves. You got Francisco Lindor, 90.5 on RBIs. He's done that over the last 2 years, so I'd pick more on all of those guys. You can combine that and win big. And if you sign up today, download the app, and you use the code LOCKEDONMLB, you'll get a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. Let's talk about some Mets X factors for this season. And the first 2 I'm going to go through are on the pitching side. It is Sean Manaea and Luis Severino. Manaea closed out his spring on Monday and did a great job in a dress rehearsal game against the New York Yankees. 5 innings pitched, 5 hits allowed, 2 runs. Did not walk any, though, and he struck out 7 and made some hitters who are really good look really bad. He struck out Aaron Judge twice. He struck out Anthony Rizzo, and he struck out Juan Soto amongst those 7 strikeouts. Over the last 3 starts, Sean Manaea has struck out 18 in 14 innings pitched. He's allowed just 3 runs. And in this final start, he got 8 swings on his sweeper. 6 were whiffs. 1 was a foul. That pitch looks devastating. Overall, he got 15 whiffs on 37 pitches. 15 whiffs on 37 swings. That's a whiff percentage of 41%. He looks locked in. His stuff looks really good. He's stretched out. If you look at upside in this rotation right now, it's pretty clear who the Mets have that could deliver a little bit more than you would have expected when they signed and when they went into spring training. And it's Severino and Manaea. Adrian Hauser was a trade acquisition that gives you a nice floor innings eater. And hey, maybe at some point this season, he's not even in the rotation. I mean, he pretty much throughout his career in Milwaukee always ended up spending a little bit of time in the bullpen. And you got David Peterson, who could be back in June. I think actually it's at the absolute end of May, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's May 27th. He can come off the 60-day IL. Kodai Senga, probably June, but maybe a little before that. Those 2 guys could bump 2 from the rotation. And obviously, I think Hauser and McGill might be, the guys that would end up getting knocked out of this rotation. Look at Jose Quintana. He hasn't thrown the ball well in spring. I just don't know if he has some crazy ceiling he can get to. I think if all works out for Quintana, he pitches to a sub-4 ERA and he gives you some innings. But Sean Manaea and Luis Severino had the chance to actually be dominant to a certain extent. Guys that in a world where the Mets put together a great season and find their way into the playoffs, who could grab the ball in October. Now, Manaea hasn't necessarily been that for large portions of his career, but he is a pitcher that has improved a lot lately with his work, going to driveline, extra velocity on his fastball, the addition of a sweeper. Hopefully these things can translate over a full season in the rotation and he can have a lot of success. And that brings me to the other X factor that I've been alluding to here, which is Luis Severino. I am optimistic right now that Sevy is going to be, if healthy this year, a really good starting pitcher for this team. A guy that fans start to circle his day where he starts and are more excited to go to the ballpark, more excited to watch on TV. A guy that can be electric and can, for a season, sort of capture the fan base a little bit. I really believe Severino has that. I think, so often we have seen the inverse of this, right? Where the former Met goes to the Yankees and has all of that success. There has been, of course, a few examples where it's gone the other way. Todd Frazier had some success with the Mets. Curtis Granderson certainly had a lot of success with the Mets. But it's usually not the direction these things go. Sometimes it's you get the former Yankee and it's the guy on their way out. But I really think here with Severino, the stuff is still there. He's still young enough and he's pitching for that big contract. Will he ever get the 5-6 year deal that's 9 figures based on the injury track record that he has and the lack of performance we saw last year? Who knows? But that's what he's got on his mind this year. He's got a chance at an age that he's young enough to still do it, to be a great starting pitcher again and really add a lot of dollars to his bank account, and also to help the Mets win in a pretty significant way. I said it on, I think, yesterday's show when I was talking about Severino's last spring start. It's hard to look at spring results and take too much from them. But what I will note when it comes to Luis Severino is he did nothing but show us enough flashes that you can believe come opening day that he's got a really good season in him. And we'll see. He might go out there against the Brewers on Saturday and get shelled and make me look foolish very quickly. But I like this stuff. And it's the same thing with Sean Manaea. These two guys are showcasing really good stuff. Whereas when you watch a Quintana right now or a Hauser, you're not quite seeing that same level of stuff. And even McGill to a certain extent, although he's done a nice job with the strikeouts as well. We've seen the velocity being a good spot for McGill. He is working on that American spork, and he's got the slider. Like there are some good pitches in McGill's arsenal. I still believe he's got a little bit of upside there too. But the X factors this season in the starting rotation is the two guys that got paid this offseason. The Mets were expecting some big things there, and they might have just nailed both of those signings. Now I got 3 position players to round out my X factors next here. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 wins. That's $200 in bonus bets to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. And also right now, before it's too late, MLB futures. You want to bet on the Mets to win the World Series at plus 5,000. Over under win total 81.5. You want to bet on what else we got? Pete Alonso home runs 41.5. You can find all of that available over at FanDuel. And again, before you place those MLB futures, you want to place a $5 bet on a tournament game or an NBA game. And if you win that, you're going to get $200 in those bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops till they cut down the nets. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Before we get into my 3 position player X factors, I do want to give a few honorable mentions out there. The first one to Edwin Diaz. Edwin is certainly an X factor in the sense that having him back in the bullpen is going to make the Mets significantly better. But when I pick X factors, I like to look at guys that could go either way. Maybe that's just a flaw in my brain and how I view X factors. But to me, it's a guy that if they hit, wow, this is going to be a completely different season for the Mets. But there's still that doubt if it can happen. I obviously Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, they're all X factors to a certain extent, but I trust all of them to have good performances. So getting to the three guys that I really have picked here, we're looking at Brett Baty, Jeff McNeil, and Francisco Alvarez. And I will also note that I considered Starling Marte, but ultimately I think even though Marte could certainly improve the ceiling of this team again, if Marte doesn't, I can see other options filling in. I can see a Drew Gilbert in right field for a large portion of this season, one of the Mets' top prospects. If he can have a good start to the year in Syracuse and Marte gets hurt, I could see that filling a gap. I could see the Mets now with JD Martinez going more defense heavy and having Tyrone Taylor in right field a ton. So because of their options, even second base, let's just say Acuna or Jet Williams comes up, or Zach Short ends up being amazing and plays second base, or Joey Wendell's having a nice year. Jeff McNeil can slide to the outfield. So because of Marte, having that question mark where I still don't know what they're going to get, and I could see them getting by without him, didn't want to pin him as one of my 5 X factors. So again, we got Severino and Minaya. Here are the other 3 that have to be great for the Mets to have an awesome season. And we'll begin with Brett Baty. And speaking of Baty, we got the giveaway. Ooh, I did not damage it when I smashed this against the desk. It still looks good. Signed photo of Brett Baty. If you want a chance to enter for a chance to win, you got to be a Locked On Mets insider. You can find a link in the episode description. I'll be giving the details of that giveaway on Wednesday through subtext to all of our insiders. This is also the place where you can go to ask me questions anytime and where you will get updates when any news item breaks on the Mets. So if you want to be a Locked On Mets insider to enter for a chance to win the Brett Baty signed photo, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. And I'll say there's part of me that didn't want to give away that photo because I think Brett Baty's going to have a big year and it's just going to go up in value. I think this is the year he arrives. Now, I believed in him last year, but we saw it in spring training, right? In March, he really settled in nicely. Not only did he hit for a high average, he drew his walks, hit a couple home runs. He, didn't strike out a ton. There was a gaffe that we saw, in the field defensively, and I think those are going to come. I am still not entirely sure what type of defender he's going to be over the full course of the season here. Is he going to put together a above average defensive season? I think that's unlikely. Can he be league average? I hope so. It might fall in where by the end of the year, he is -3 outs above average and -3 defensive run saves, something along those lines where he grades out slightly below average. But when you're watching him day in, day out, he's just not killing you too much over at third base. The bat has to play. That is what's going to affect his future with the Mets. That's what's going to secure him that position in the lineup. He's got to hit. And I think the Mets are going to put him in a good position with someone like Zach Short to be able to go up against left-handed pitchers, who's going to actually also give him some relief defensively throughout the year. I think that'll be nice. Maybe at some point, too, you could see a Mark Vientos up to be a platoon partner. You could see Luis Angel Acuna even come up and be a platoon partner. But I think Brett Baty getting a healthy diet of right-handed pitching throughout the year can settle in really nicely and put up some good offensive numbers. I think the power is going to come. I don't know if he's going to hit 25 plus home runs, but can Brett Baty hit 17, 18 home runs while batting 260 at least and getting on base at a 340 clip? You put that all together, if he's a 740, 750 OPS guy with solid defense at third base, if they're just getting average production of there to slightly above average instead of last year where Baty was pretty much the worst worst overall third baseman in baseball, that's going to do a lot for this team. And I still have hope that a top 20 prospect in all of baseball just last year could find that form again on a upstart team with a rookie manager as opposed to a failing team that's full of veterans where he maybe felt like a fish out of water with a veteran manager. I just think all the different things surrounding Baty have put him in a much better position to win this year, or not just to win, to help the Mets win, but to have a good year and to hopefully deliver on that promise that we've all seen in him throughout his trajectory as a prospect. The next guy is the other one from his rookie class there, Francisco Alvarez. Look, you want to talk about superstar X factor, that's what Alvarez can be. I am predicting, and I'm going to spoil maybe one of my bold predictions. I might have a couple on Alvarez. I still got to figure out my exact list here now that JD Martinez is part of the Mets. That's going to be a future episode this week here. But one of the things that I think is going to happen this year is Francisco Alvarez is going to be an all-star. And I believe by the end of the season, he's going to be widely considered at least a top 5 catcher in all of baseball. Is he going to be better than Adley Rutschman? Pretty much doubted. Is he going to be better than Will Smith for the Dodgers? I don't think so. Is he going to be better than Cal Raleigh for the Mariners? Those are all some really good catchers. With that said, Alvarez looks amazing defensively. And I think he's going to be a more consistent offensive player who could hit 30 home runs because last year he hit 25. And if everything clicks for him, he could even push for 40. He's got that level of pop. So he's absolutely an X factor because he could take that superstar leap this year and be one of the best 3 players on this Mets team by season's end. He can put up a crazy F4 number when it comes to wins above replacement. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Alvarez play out this full season here. The last X factor is Jeff McNeil. The Mets need the good version of Jeff McNeil. He is too important to this team. And when he goes, the team goes. 2021, Jeff McNeil was in the tank. The Mets were in the tank. 2022, Jeff McNeil was a batting title champion. He was awesome. The Mets won 101 games. Last year, Jeff McNeil had a dreadful season. The Mets disappointed. So they need Jeff McNeil to get back to his batting title champion ways. Not necessarily winning it, but hitting 310 or better. That's what Jeff McNeil needs to do. He's going to give you the defensive versatility that's always going to make him a valuable player on your roster, but you need him to be a threat in the box. And I think it's great now that he's going to be batting maybe 5th behind JD Martinez. That's not as much pressure as asking him to be the cleanup hitter behind Pete Alonso. But I really do think that he can have a really nice season. I don't believe that he fell off last year and will never get back to it. I think it was just a frustrating season. I think McNeil might be a player that gives you that sort of varying degrees of production year in, year out, because so much relies on his hit tool and being able to hit for that high average. He's not going to bail himself out by popping some home runs in a bad year like Pete Alonso did, where he had 46 last year? If I'm not mistaken. Geez. But did so with a terrible batting average and an on-base percentage that plummeted. Pete still was able to find value. For McNeil, he's got to hit for that average, and I think he will. So those are my 5 X factors to look forward to this season. Luis Severino and Sean Manaea in the starting rotation, and Brett Baty, Francisco Alvarez, and Jeff McNeil in the starting lineup. As I mentioned, throughout the week here, we got top 10 bold predictions, which will probably be tomorrow's show. I'm also going to do top 10 reasons to believe in the Mets this year. And that'll be it. That'll be opening day, hopefully, assuming there's not a rain out. But we will talk about that a little more later this week. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Our next goal is 9,000 subs. We're making the push there now. I appreciate all of you who are subscribing. Make sure you follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24 streaming channel on YouTube that covers everything in the world of sports. Locked On Sports Today has our local hosts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. You can find it streaming 24/7 on YouTube.